I realized I hadn't changed my phone message when I called myself to do a reminder for something the other day. And it still has my old senior secretary, and I said, oh, I probably should change that. For a long time, I didn't do it because I didn't want anyone to get mad or think, but then they reclassed a whole bunch of people when they did the class thing, and I thought, hey there.
you want me to switch Josh and Reggie just yeah. Yeah.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 14th, 2017 meeting of the City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm Chuck Sally, and I serve as chair of the board, and at this time I'd like to introduce to you the other members of the board. To my far left is Reggie McKnight. Right next to Reggie is Josh Speed, and then to my right is April Jones, followed by Gene Dinkins, and then on the very end, Marcellus Primus. At this time, I would also like to introduce members of the staff that will assist the board during the meeting. At the front table, it's Brian Cook, zoning administrator, and Rachel Bailey is the deputy zoning administrator. Also, Andrea Wolf is the land use board coordinator. This board is charged with hearing applications for special exceptions, variances, and administrative appeals. All testimony is recorded for the record, and anyone wishing to speak will need to be sworn and must come up to the podium to speak. No testimony may be taken from the floor. When you come up to the podium, state your name and please speak clearly into the microphone because the meeting is being recorded. For those of you who plan to speak, you must be sworn. So if you are here as an applicant or here to speak on any of the cases, please stand at this time and raise your right hand. Do you affirm or attest that the testimony you will give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. I'll now turn the meeting over to Mr. Cook.
Hey, good morning. So we'll start with a few items, housekeeping items, items that were withdrawn and or deferred. Item number 6 on your agenda, it's at 1603 and 1605 Bull Street. That case, 2017-0073 variance has been withdrawn by the applicant. Item number 7, 2017-0072 special exception at 621 and 623 Saluda Avenue has been deferred until the December meeting. Item number 8, 2017-0074 special exception, that's 3611 Marstetler Street, has been deferred by the applicant until next month's meeting, that'll be in December. So if you're here for any of those cases, they have been withdrawn and or deferred until the next month's meeting. They will not be heard today. Move next to the consent agenda. The Board of Zoning Appeals uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the board or general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The board then approves the remaining consent agenda items. So now I'll be reading the consent agenda items. So after I read the consent agenda items, I will ask if anyone on the board or anyone in the audience would like any of these items removed from the consent agenda. If you would like an item removed from the consent agenda, please raise your hand or stand or otherwise get the attention of the chairperson, and we will get that item removed from the consent agenda. Mr. Chairman, the following items are on the consent agenda today. This item number 1 is the approval of the October 10th, 2017 minutes. Item number 2, 2017-0091 variance at 1015 Rosewood Avenue. Item number 3, 2017-0092 variance, Performance Parkway. Item number 4, 2017-0093 variance, 2519 Divine Street. Item number 5, 2017-009 variance, that's at 2700 Divine Street. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the consent agenda. If anyone on the board or anyone in the audience would like any of these items removed from the consent agenda at this time.
I see no one. We will make a motion, then go ahead and vote on these items. I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, subject to the stipulations in the application by staff.
Second.
That's it. First and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The consent agenda is approved.
Move to item number 9 on the agenda today. That's 2017-0094 variance, 2700 Divine Street, tax map 11316-1201. The variance to the parking requirements for retail use. This is an existing retail building that the applicant is requesting to expand and convert the use. It's partially used as a restaurant now, and they intend to turn it into a retail use. Because of the parking that is required for the use, there is not adequate parking available. The applicant is requesting a variance to the parking requirements for this retail use. Where 10 parking spaces are required, the applicant is proposing 4 spaces instead. The applicant is here and can explain the request.
Good morning. This is Charlie Baker with Architectural Concepts, and I've been working with Evan Hobbs, who's the owner of the building, and it's really just about half of the building is an existing Divine Foods restaurant, which is closing. And so we'd like to add some additional space onto the building itself, a little in the front as well as some in the rear, so that this would become just a retail clothing store. And so we're reducing it from a restaurant to a clothing store. And so I would like for the owners really just to tell you a little bit about really his overall plans for the building.
Hey, I'm Evan Hobbs, as Charlie mentioned, and kind of background is the retailer that would be going here is Copper Penny, which we've had in business in 5 Points for 4.5 years now. And the plan would be to convert the existing brick facade on the porch now over and then go in the back of the building to have the required retail space of approximately, hoping to get around 2,100 square feet on the retail site to keep the existing space on the corner, LaRoque, intact, while also enhancing the existing current restaurant to more in line with the remaining retail facade on the block. That is the plan as the hopeful plan as of now. We're aware we are losing some parking, and that's the reason why we're requesting the variance currently. Copper Penny we were their first franchise, so my wife Molly and her business partner, who both live in Columbia, are the owners of the operating entity, and they would be the ones that would be occupying the space, and hoping that we can make this a permanent home for Copper Penny. We've been looking for a permanent home for Copper Penny for a number of years, and we're hopeful that we feel that this space in this area will make this area of retail and restaurant in Columbia make it stronger. So that's kind of the background on the plan. We're still in preliminary stages with actual what would be inside it, and et cetera, but it would be retail extending out in the back behind the building.
Do you have a copy of the site plan?
There it is, right there.
We're adding landscaping just along Divine Street right in front of the building, as well as we're adding landscaping on the corner of Divine as well as Woodrow, just to overall enhance really that part of the street itself.
So, Charlie, I'm looking at this site plan, and it looks like y'all are tearing down that little porch portion of the building and creating more parking along Divine? Is that?
No, the porch portion would be squared off.
Right, I gotcha.
So the current porch to the inside would be leveled on one level. So the parking that I think currently is to-go parking primarily in the front of the porch entrance would be gone. It would be kind of squared off so that if you're coming up the hill from 5 Points, the exterior jut would kind of be kind of in parallel or kind of in with Craft and Draft existing window front on that front part.
And in so doing, you're creating the handicap parking place and 3 additional parking places. And it appears like those spaces would then have enough room to actually back up and not have to back into Divine Street. Is that the plan? Did you do a plan on that?
Well, those are actually existing parking spaces that they've used for, just for years, and they've been there. And we were not changing, that existing.
It doesn't look like the addition is what I'm saying is actually going any further than the existing parking places.
Oh, that's right, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, there'd be room to back up like there is now versus, and it wouldn't be directly into the street.
If I, Mr. Chairman, may add, we would not permit any new parking backing into Divine Street as it would back in the right-of-way.
Right, so that, we're good with that part of it, from this way this site plan is. Then my only other question is, I'm trying to figure out how you get to the 3 parking spaces in the back. It looks like you've got them landscaped out.
Well, there's a sidewalk. Let's see, that's on
Yeah,
the
but how does the
side.
car get to them? How does the car get to there?
Oh, they've got the entry drive in the back, and then,
So that's coming, that's a curb cut?
that is an existing curb cut.
Okay, gotcha,
And so there is parking back there now.
gotcha.
I have a quick question for staff. Knowing that we just approved a variance to the buffer transition door requirement, does that satisfy all landscape requirements behind the building?
It does. There's a egress back there, and it is tight for sure parking. The staff would ask if you're inclined to approve this request that a new parking zone be placed along the brick wall where cars currently park now to separate the residential use from the commercial use. It is tight. Maneuverability is not ideal, so that new parking there would be sufficient to get cars in and out for the remaining spots. So it would take care of the requirements for the landscape buffer based on the prior approval.
So the existing curb cut on Woodrow Street is being removed, is that?
No, that's
Nope.
staying as is, really as access just behind the buildings. That existing curb cut is staying.
I guess there's 2 curb cuts. You might be referring to the curb cut in the front.
Oh,
A
the
little
front.
bit confused.
Okay, I was talking about the one behind the building.
I'm looking at the course that when I first looked at it, I was looking at Divine, thinking that was actually the street behind. But I see now, so that the handicap parking spaces is actually be the back of the building, and that'll be accessed through one curb cut on the back curb cut where Woodrow is.
That's correct.
And now, and then it looks like the other curb cut that was at the corner, which was not a very good situation, is being removed.
Being removed.
Charlie,
I've got a van space there in the back now.
Gotcha.
any feedback either way from any of the residential neighbors behind you or beside you? Or?
I think Evan has gotten some phone calls.
I've talked to the neighbor, not anybody behind us per se, but we're not really, the buffer is kind of still going to be the same from that standpoint. We've talked to some neighbors on the block about the plan, and there was some inclination to want to make sure that we kind of kept the existing front so that we kind of kept both retailers intact as they currently are, because we're not really going to block or hinder any view from LaRoque or Craft and Draft's visibility.
That was their main concern.
So that's going to be kept intact by just bringing it up to the initial brick line where it is right now.
Okay. So, just to go through the variances, I just want to make sure we've got those covered for the criteria. If you've got them handy and want to go with me, I'll read them to you if you don't. But the first is describe the extraordinary exceptional conditions such as the size, shape, topography, et cetera, that pertain to the subject property and as a requirement for this variance.
with the overall configuration I had with the building, and then they really needed additional space. So that's why I was only going out on the front, just in line with the existing front, really just to keep the visibility along Divine Street, as well as add landscaping to Divine Street.
Right.
I did have space in the rear that was being used for delivery and stuff for the restaurant itself.
Right.
And really, so I took that space as additional space for the retail store.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the lot being the corner of Woodrow and Divine and the building extending all the way to the sidewalk on Woodrow's side of the property doesn't allow a workaround, so you're required to basically have two different parking lots, one that accesses off of Woodrow and one that would be accessed off of Divine Street. And that's special, that's unusual to this lot than other lots in the area as far as the requirement for this variance. Would that be true?
Yes, because we do not have any access from the back to the front without coming around on the sidewalk.
I think we have described the conditions noted above already, and described the ways in which the application of the requirements of the zoning ordinance effectively prohibit and unreasonably restrict the utilization of the subject property. I think we are asking for a reduction in the parking that would not be, I don't think the existing building had the right parking to begin with as far as the requirements for that, and we're downgrading the use of it, right, to a clothing store as opposed to a restaurant, requiring less parking. Describe the way granting the variance will not be substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good.
I was gonna say, I think we've kept both the existing property owners to the rear and to the side we haven't altered or hindered their ability to, their billboards or location or their ability to get in and out of their current spaces.
And then number 5 is the variance requests the minimum necessary.
This is the minimum size building
Right.
that they need for the retail space.
Our requirement from from Copper Penny is really 2,100 square feet is what they require us to have, space for retail.
Right. So you're basically building the minimum really required for the retail clothing store to operate on this site.
That's right.
And then 6, explain how your proposal is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare.
I think we have really tied in within the overall neighborhood, and we've actually improved it with landscaping, and we've been very cognizant of the retail spaces on either side of the building itself.
And the use as a clothing store will be less extensive than as a restaurant.
Yes,
Right,
quite a bit.
correct.
That's correct.
How are you going to keep people from parking in the ingress-egress easement in the rear? Is there any signage or anything identifying that? Because I ride by there a lot, and I notice people are commonly parked in that area, whether it's employees or, I think some sort of signage.
I think we
might
could
be a
put some
good
signs,
idea.
no parking signs.
You wouldn't know it, when you ride by there, and if parking is going to be potentially a problem, I think that would be a good idea.
We can certainly add signage,
I think that
absolutely.
would help.
Okay.
Because if people are parked there, it really is going to be difficult to
Yes,
practically maneuver, so,
absolutely, I understand.
yep.
Very good. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor or against this application? Any other questions from the board? I'd like to make a motion then that we approve this request for a variance based on the testimony of the applicant and the written application with the criteria that they will agree to put some signage on the property that will denote the egress-ingress easement as a no parking area. And subject to any other comments from staff in the application. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank you very much.
Motion carries.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item, number 10, is case 2017-0095, special exception. Mr. Dinkins has recused himself from this particular item as he may have a conflict with this particular case. So he will not be making or sitting on the board during this case, and he has left the room for the record. So again, item number 10 is 2017-0095, special exception. It's at 2227 and 2229 Wheat Street. That's tax map 11312, 10 and 12. It's a special exception to change to another non-conforming use. So this is one you may not have seen before. It's not one that comes up very often. The circumstances with this, you have an existing lot of record with 3 dwellings on it, a single-family home and 2 duplexes. The main house, which you can see on the aerial, and around March 2017, caught on fire and was substantially damaged. The zoning district permits 1 home per lot in this area. So we have a non-conforming situation wherein you have 3 homes on 1 lot. The single-family home up front and then the duplex in the back. Section 17202A permits the Board of Zoning Appeals to permit a change in use for a non-conforming use, structure, or characteristics of use to be changed to another non-conforming use, structure, or characteristic of use by permitting another non-conforming use. So, in other words, what they're asking for today, whereas before the fire they had 3 dwelling units on this property, they're asking for 2 dwelling units to remain. So instead of having the big house, the main single-family house on the front, demolished, which would leave a duplex in the back, again, some would argue not an ideal situation, what the applicants are asking today is to remove the duplex in the back and have it as 1 unit, and to repair and or rebuild the single-family home that would be in character with the existing homes on the block. So you had 3 units on a lot that only could have one caught on fire, the big single-family home. The applicant is asking to have 2 units instead of 3. So it's basically going from one non-conforming use or structure to another non-conforming use or structure. And the board is authorized to permit this as a special exception with the finding that the use or characteristic of use is more in character with the uses permitted in the district. The applicants are here and they can explain the situation.
Brian, I had a quick question before we begin. So if it was 1 house per lot, how did it get to 3?
It's a non-conforming situation that's been in existence as far as we can tell back before the zoning ordinance as we know it today was in place. So it's non-conforming as it is allowed to continue as long as it is not damaged, for example, by fire or some other period of vacancy or abandonment. So it's just a non-conforming use.
So you're saying that before there was a zoning law regarding how many houses per lot, they had 3? Is that what you're letting me know?
Right. This house probably goes back to, this is just me, off the cuff, back to the 40s probably. That it was a
We had no
non-conforming.
zoning ordinances in the 40s? Is that what you're letting me know?
No, we've had a zoning ordinance for back probably into the 20s in the city, but it's changed through the years. So these 3 were constructed, to all accounts constructed legally at the time, and they're just non-conforming as they don't meet the current ordinance. So the idea behind a non-conformity is not to continue or the use until something, catastrophic like a fire or abandonment occurs, and then that kind of goes away. Otherwise, as long as they're maintaining it, they can continue to use it in perpetuity. So.
And is that common within Shandon?
Yeah, there are garage apartments. There are duplexes in certain areas that don't meet lot size, setbacks. In some of your older areas, the zoning rules through the years would have changed, and there are, in older neighborhoods, a lot of non-conforming situations. Not just Shandon, any other older area, and you would find the same situation.
So just for my final clarification, so they didn't have to ask for a special exception for the 3 houses on the one lot. It was just something that was grandfathered in.
Yeah, going back to the 40s, I can't tell you what the rules were back then, but there are non-conforming certificates on file that show that they have been there going back a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. So what we want to do is, there's a big history and there's a big story behind the fire, and it's taken a long time. We live in Miami, and this has been our second home. So we had to come up initially to talk to the adjuster, and then after we spoke to him, we came back a few other times to talk to some contractors who we were interviewing to do the job. And throughout that process, we ended up with a contractor who was more a talker instead of a doer. So after several months of that, we decided to, no longer work with him. And immediately we found another contractor who repaired our neighbor's house who had a similar fire to ours a couple of years ago. And we've been working since then with him. And we've been negotiating back and forth with the insurance company for months and months and months. We just finally got our final check from them August 22nd. So with that, then we had a hurricane down in Miami, and we had to leave Miami. And everything's been getting backed up, and that's puts us in the situation that we're in today. But basically, what we wanted to do, we've had a couple contractors told us that it would probably be best just to level the property, but we decided we want to put it back to the actual structure that it is.
Right.
So we're going to go forward with that. Once we terminated the other, he was on hire, but we got rid of the other contractor, we immediately met with Ray Horvath, who was a prominent GC, been working 35 years in South Carolina. And we immediately started working with him to get things going. So I think he went down to the zoning late August, and he was turned down because of the existing structure in the back. So that's where we are with that.
Just for the record, you're Mr. Philip Lucas?
Yes.
The property owner?
My wife.
Thank you.
Yes.
And your wife is Mrs. Cheryl Lucas, was also on the podium with you.
Yes.
And so, are you familiar with the application that y'all turned in, and do you have a copy of it?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
we can kind of go through what the criteria are for the application?
Yes, we do.
And I urge you to get as close to the microphone as you can so that we can hear you and
Okay.
they can understand the thing. So I guess the first one is describe in what ways the proposed special exception will not have a substantial adverse impact on vehicular traffic or vehicular pedestrian safety, and how adequate provisions are made in the proposed exception for parking in or for loading and unloading.
And the elimination of one of the 2 apartments will lessen the intensity of the use back there. And in addition to that, going forward, we're not have any intentions of running that back there, so the traffic will be not an issue at all.
Very good. Number 2, describe in what ways the proposed special exception will not have a substantial adverse impact on adjoining properties in terms of environmental factors such as noise, lights, glare, vibration, fumes, odors, obstruction of air or light, and litter.
Yes, it's an existing property, and we're going to remove one of the units back there.
And
So it'll be
then
less.
So really, there's no added lighting or anything that would be more detrimental to your neighbors as far as what was existing there now. And it would actually improve that from the standpoint of not having rental units, multiple rental units in the backyard. Okay, number 3, describe the ways the proposed special exception will not have a substantial impact on the aesthetics of the area, and to include a review of the orientation and spacing of the buildings.
We're going to rebuild the house to the way it stood, taking it down to the studs and just rebuild it the way it was, similar to, the properties in that area.
So that brings up a good point. You didn't give us a site plan, so is the plan on the back building that you're going to build is to build it in the footprint of the existing building, or where's the plan there?
No, the actual footprint of they're separate, so as far as, well, at this point, what we gave into the zoning board was the plans for the house itself. And for the plans in the back, we hadn't drawn those up, but what we're going to do is eliminate one of those apartments and make it just one.
The footprint will remain exactly the same as far as the back structure. It's just the internal portion will just be one of the kitchens will be removed, so it'll just be like down
We'll
to
have
one unit.
Yeah, one entrance instead of 2 units for that structure.
Yeah, so it's the exact same footprint for the back, and the front will actually be the same footprint or very similar.
Is that an existing 2-story building right now?
In the back, yes.
Yeah. And y'all are going to replace that with a 1-story building, or you plan to go for 2?
The bottom level has always been just storage.
I got you.
Perhaps maybe.
So it's like storage underneath and parking underneath, and then there's the duplexes are on the 2nd floor.
Correct, there's like 2 apartments, yes.
Gotcha. So you plan to keep it like that, or?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to make a one entrance and make that one living space instead of 2. Because right now when you walk up the stairs, there's a door to the right and a door to the left, and there's two
So you're planning to keep the existing structure and renovate it?
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Understood now. Okay, let me get back real quick, sorry. What number would we on? Number, April, 4?
2.
No, we were past 2. Describe the ways in which proposed special exception will not have an adverse impact on public safety or create a nuisance detrimental to the public interest or conditions like law enforcement.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we're gonna just rebuild the house the way it was and removing the 1 unit from the back, and that's similar to many other properties in that area.
So that includes the original structure that was in 1919, from what your letter stated,
Right.
and then the carriage house that was built in the 1940s. So all of that combined, correct?
When
For
you-
the house.
Yes.
Just like it was. What I'm saying is the 2 parts together as a whole, as it was before the fire.
Correct.
Okay.
And they're going from, again, three units to 1 unit, which is a lessening of the concentration as opposed to strengthen it. And then 5 is explain how the establishment of the proposed special exception will not create a concentration or proliferation of the same or similar types of special exceptions or uses and concentrations in the area. And that's fairly easy when it's an existing grandfathered facility, and they're very rare already in the area, so probably not likely to happen again. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
And then 6, explain how the proposed special exception is consistent with the character and intent of the underlying district as is indicated in the zoning district description with any applicable zoning overlay district's goals and requirements.
We're aware of that character protection overlay, and we fully intend to uphold those requirements.
All right, very good. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor or against this application?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before somebody moves on, just for point of clarity, the existing duplex in the back, they would convert that into one unit so you'd end up with 2 units instead of 3.
Correct, that's not what I said?
Yeah, no.
Said one.
Sorry, I meant to say 2 units instead of 3 units.
Yes.
I stand corrected, thanks. Thank you. Mr. Harrison, you want to approach the table?
Morning, sir.
Morning.
Morning.
I'm James C. Harrison, Jr. I live and have lived with my wife for the last 35 years about next door to this house. I consider this house to be an iconic Shandon Victorian, and all of the neighbors nearby were deeply saddened when the fire really did a job on that house. We've had many conversations with Phil and Cheryl about what they propose to do here. We are happy that they have come up with a plan that is good for the neighborhood, will actually rehabilitate this house, and further make this property more consistent with RS2 zoning. As former chairman of this board, I'm very happy to see, as I preach for my term here, following their criteria. And I'm so happy to see that I knew always that it was in the application, but boards in the past have not necessarily looked at the criteria as specifically as you're doing. And so I compliment and applaud you, and I'm not doing that to curry any favor, but as somebody who is very interested in what you're doing, I felt that. Phil and Cheryl in their application have fulfilled all the criteria, in my view, to establish this special exception. So I think they're within the statute of the city code that you are allowed to give them a special exception. I think that it steps down the use to less a use and is more consistent with RS2, and the application and the applicant fulfills all of the requirements of the criteria, in my humble opinion. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity. We hope that you will approve it. I think that if you don't approve it, it would really create a greater problem for our neighborhood, because that house now with his project is going to rehabilitate that structure. If you didn't approve that, I think it would put us back into a real mess as far as what his options are, which could include destroying the structure and that sort of thing. We're very happy that they have chosen to do what they're planning to do. And I think it'll be successful, and the neighbors surrounding applaud his approach. And we recommend you approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. And for the record, I believe that Mr. Harrison has adequately described numbers 7 and 8, which I forgot to go over with the applicant, and thank you very much for that. Is anyone else here to speak in favor or against this proposal?
My name's Matt Swinney. I am the other adjoining neighbor to Phil and Cheryl. And I experienced a fire in 2015, so I kind of know what they're going through. We've spoken at length with them and are in agreement with what their plan is. I don't have the knowledge base that Jimmy Harrison does, but I would just urge...
Not many of us do.
urge an approval of the exception, and looking forward to getting Cheryl and Phil up and running again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, I'm Robert Key. I live at 2209 Wheat Street, which is 2 doors down from the Lucases. Just want to go on record to say that we've had extensive conversation with the Lucases about their plans, and that we are supportive and appreciate their efforts to rehabilitate the house. Our position is that we would like the board to support the special exception and allow them to proceed forward as proposed.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else, or is there any questions from the board? I would first like to offer my condolences for what y'all have had to go through. It's very difficult, I know, to be displaced from your home like that, and then some of the place that it's a difficult situation, and I know you've had to deal with a lot, and we're appreciative of that as well. I would like to make a motion that we approve this special exception based on the testimony in the application and subject to any of the comments recommended by staff.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Yeah, I thought maybe y'all didn't want to sell gas. So if you would like to go ahead and approach the bench for now on the second special exception, which is application to serve, to provide fuel services at this location. And I think, if we've got the basic criteria, if we can just run through these pretty quickly, so that, if you need to add anything, or if the board feels like they need to have additional comments, we'll just kind of interject as I go through it. We'll go through it fairly quickly, because I think I would like to say, first of all, that all of the testimony that was made in the previous special exception for the convenience store, I would like, for the record, to apply to this special exception.
And excuse me, I apologize. I thought I was addressing both at the same time.
Probably should have, but
everything
we
that I
didn't.
said would apply to this one.
Right. So, as far as the service of gasoline here, the vehicular and vehicular traffic, you've already addressed from the standpoint of improving the right-in, right-out turns, et cetera, for the property, and having the Pearl, using Pearl as the main full traffic road, as opposed to the conditions now, which are you're improving substantially. Would like for you to address again, from the awning and the sale of gas, et cetera, how the environmental factors such as noise, lights, glare, vibration, fumes, and odors will not be a detriment to the area.
The project will improve local environment by increasing green space along River Drive and Pearl Street, adding stormwater quality features to the drainage system. Lights will be in accordance with city requirements and will be directed downward, minimize glare. There'll be no increase in noise beyond what is normally created by a retail operation. There's no vibrations, fumes, odors, obstructions of air or light associated with the proposed use, with the understanding that if there were a gas spill, there would be fumes for a short period of time. Litter control will be part of the written plan that will include multiple receptacles, daily pickup, and pickup along sidewalks.
And then describe the way these proposed special sections will not have an adverse impact on the character of the area, including orientation and spacing of the buildings.
In terms of orientation of the buildings, we're taking a situation that is basically crammed on the front of River Drive and separating it further back, adding more green space, making better use of the property, and generally improving the property, including removing the abandoned building. That's an eyesore there.
Very good. Then describe how this will not have an adverse impact on public safety or create a nuisance conditions detrimental to the public interest.
Again, the convenience store itself and the gas pumps will not have any direct adverse impact to public safety. Loitering will be controlled,
as part of a written plan, be enforced by the owner, and the owner will take part in a crime prevention program with the City of Columbia.
What is that crime prevention program?
It's basically, I think, communications. I mean, there's the city, the police department will provide information on how the convenience store can be operated to minimize crime. Basically, not allowing loitering, that sort of thing, using video cameras. It's a whole list of items.
So basically, it's helpful tips from the police to the owner. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
It's helpful tips from the police to the owner. Is that what you're saying?
That's part of it, and also direct communication between the police department and the owner. And even the neighborhoods will have contact numbers they can call to.
Contact numbers of whom?
They can call, if they see something they think is strange, they can call. They'll have a line of communication directly to the operator of the convenience store, and of course the police department, as always.
Okay.
And then again, I think the testimony has covered this, but does explain how this is not creating a concentration or proliferation of the same types or similar types of special exception uses in the area?
Yeah, it's not likely to have any buildup of the same use in this area, as mentioned before.
Right. And then again, number 6, the proposed special exception is consistent with the character and intent of the underlying district, as indicated in the zoning description, which is C3.
Yeah, C3 is intended for a variety of general commercial uses, characterized by retail, office, and services, and we're providing a retail use here. And again, as mentioned before, strip developments are not encouraged, and we are eliminating that from this property.
And describe how the proposed special exception is appropriate for the location and compatible with the other uses adjacent to the vicinity of the property.
Again, we're replacing an existing convenience store that's already serving the area. We're basically just improving that service. And we feel like it's going to be a true convenience to the neighborhoods surrounding it.
And finally, explain the ways the proposed special exception will not adversely affect the public interest.
Again, this convenience store will enhance public interest by providing local residents with the basic goods without having to travel out of their neighborhoods.
Right. And we are talking about the sale of gasoline and fuel products, not convenience stores at this point, but the actually, I guess you could say that because there are very few stations in the area, that this would be a service to the public from the standpoint of having a
right. Gasoline is a very basic service that almost all of us need, and we're providing it much more convenient to the local neighborhoods.
Very well. Is there anyone here in favor or here to speak in favor or against this? Is there any questions from the board? Then I would like to make a motion that we approve this special exception, subject to the comments of staff, based upon the testimony and the written application given here today.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the items on the agenda today. We have no other business.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
We are now adjourned.
Yeah. Hey, Jack.